Chico of the Andes, Chapter 17, Chico Decides. And then the padre told me that he, himself, had known my own mother. He married her to my father, Carlos, in that very cathedral. Chico's brown eyes shone softly with the wonder of it. Now that he had had time to collect himself, it seemed no less than a miracle that he actually knew who he was. To think that he had talked with someone who had known his mother. Chico was seated on one of the black, cane-bottomed chairs in the little sala. Don Ernesto and Tia Maria, who still wore the long apron in which she had rushed out of the kitchen, sat opposite him on the other side of the round table. Pedro and his sisters leaned over the back of their mother's chair. They all listened breathlessly to Chico's tale. "What else did the padre say?" prompted Don Ernesto when Chico paused and seemed to lose himself in dreams. "Let me think. Oh yes, he said that I owned a little farm outside of Cañar. That is, I do, when I am grown up," he finished thoughtfully. Pedro and the other children stared respectfully at the young boy. He was only 10 years old, and he owned a real farm with a house on it. Don Ernesto frowned. It was impossible to get the boy to remember what he had been told. He, himself, would have to talk to the padre. After all, he was responsible for the boy in place of Don Fernando. Someone would have to make plans for him. "Chico," Tia Maria spoke softly, dabbing at her eyes with a corner of the apron. The story was so sad, even though it was happy too, that she could not help crying. "Sí, Doña Maria?" Chico looked toward the tiny woman. "Chico, did the padre not say if you had some relatives? Are there none left?" Chico frowned as he thought. I think, Senora, I think he said there were some in Loja, some distant relatives of my father." "But what about those of your mother, Chico?" broke in Don Ernesto. "Surely there must be someone." "I did not ask very much, Senor." Chico looked ashamed. "I was so excited," he explained. "But, oh yes, I remember now. Pardon me, Don Ernesto, for interrupting," he added. "I remember the padre said something about my mother's father. My grandfather, I suppose. Would it not be?" Chico was not used to thinking that he had a family. "Yeah, he said that my grandfather lived somewhere in the mountains," he thought. No one knew his name, though. "I suppose it would be impossible to find him, would it not?" he asked wistfully. See, that it would," answered Don Ernesto. "You say he lives in the mountains?" He looked more and more thoughtful. "What was your mother's name again, Chico?" "Josefina Rodriguez, before she married Don Ernesto." Chico could not help but glance at the other children proudly. How good it was to be able to speak his mother's name. Rodriguez. No, I thought I knew the mountains as well as any man, but I know no one by that name." "Did the padre know nothing more about this grandfather?" asked Tia Maria. "I do not think. Yes, he said that my mother had spoken often of him to her neighbors. She said that there was one mark by which he could be told. It was a red birthmark shaped like a melon, right in the middle of his back." I remember now because the padre thought it was strange that my mamita should never mention his name, but should tell about the mark. "It is strange, is it not, Don Ernesto?" "It is, my boy. And I'm afraid the mark will be no help to us. We can hardly wander over the mountains and ask every old man to take off his shirt, can we?" Don Ernesto laughed heartily at his own joke. The laughter made everyone feel better. The spell of sadness that had hung over them was broken. After all, this was a day to be happy. It was true that poor Chico was still an orphan, but he had a name and his own bit of earth. Tia Maria stood up and shook out her apron. "Come, Juana and Olivia, we must make an especially nice dinner tonight. It is in honor of our little friend Gregorio, no, that is too long, of Goyo." The little woman smiled gaily at the boy and bustled out of the room, shooing her children before her. Don Ernesto pulled his chair up a bit and leaned toward the boy Chico, or Goyo, as we must now call him. Goyo, there are things we must decide now, he said seriously. This discovery has changed many things. We must make plans. Goyo waited. First, what will you do now? You have your land. No doubt, with the Padre's help, we could get it for you. Do you want to go to Loja to see your father's people? It is a long journey, and it may be some time before a mule train goes that way, but you are welcome to stay here until that time. Or do you want to live here and go to school and weave your hats? You still have a great deal of money, and now that you need not search for your family, it should last a long time. What do you want to do? Chico, who was now Goyo, leaned his chin on the palm of his hand and stared at the floor. The day had been so exciting that he had not thought of the future. Now he must decide. Don Ernesto was kind, but somehow none of the things he spoke of seemed just right. A sort of hard lump seemed to slip into his throat and choke him. Don Ernesto watched the boy and then spoke again. I ask now, Goyo, because in 2 days I leave on another journey. I would like to see you settled, so that I may tell Viejito that you are well and happy, if... At the mention of Viejito, the boy's eyes filled with tears. Before he knew it, he had thrown himself on Don Ernesto and lay there sobbing as if his heart would break. Don Ernesto patted him awkwardly and smoothed the brown hair. What is it, Chico? In his distress, Don Ernesto forgot the new name. What is the matter? Tell me. Do not be afraid. Goyo lifted his face with the damp flood of tears, covering it, and burst out, Oh, Don Ernesto, take me with you. Take me back to the Paramos and grandfather and Chan and everything, he sobbed. I want to go with you. Please, please. I've been thinking of it for many days, and that is where I want to go, back to the Paramos. I want to live with old man forever. But Goyo... Don Ernesto lifted the boy up and looked at him in surprise. Are you crying for that? Of course you may go. If that is what you want, I shall be glad to take you back. Goyo looked at him unbelievingly. Then he began to smile. Really, Don Ernesto? Really? He asked. The man nodded. Oh, I'm going back to the Paramos. I'm going back to grandfather. Goyo stood up and danced about the room, chanting it over and over again. I am going back. Don Ernesto leaned back in his chair and smiled. Well, I never thought it would take so little to make you happy, he said. But what about your farm and your hat weaving? Remember, the buyer said he would pay you 50 sucres for each one. I can make hats up there just as I did before. And the farm... Chico paused to think. I shall talk to Viejito. Perhaps he will come down and live there with me during the rainy season when the potato crop is over. We could make hats together and run the farm, and then we could go back to the mountains in the dry season. When we live in Cañar, I could go to school too if you think I must, he finished. Don Ernesto snorted. I would not count on the farm part, he said. To get Don Fernando to leave the Paramos would be like taking the stubbornness out of one of my mules. It would be just as impossible. Besides, he would not like to live on someone else's land. He is very independent, you know. Oh, I shall persuade him, Goyo murmured confidently. Well then, everything is settled. We shall leave at daylight 2 days from now. Goyo stood lost in thought and hardly heard Don Ernesto. Don Ernesto, how much money have I left? He asked. About 35 sucres, I suppose. Shall I count it? No, but how much does a sheep cost? He asked. A smile twisted the man's lips as he watched the boy. About 5 sucres, I should say. Perhaps less, he answered. Goyo started toward the door. Here, where are you going? Called Don Ernesto. I am going to buy 6 sheep to take to grandfather for a present, Goyo answered, and disappeared through the door. A fine help you will be to me with the mules if you are going to drive 6 loco sheep up the mountain. Don Ernesto reflected. Chapter 18. Return to the Paramos. The first thing Goyo heard on his return was the crowing of old Inca in the distance. He turned to look back at Don Ernesto to see if he too had heard. The arriero nodded and smiled. Goyo skipped a step. He could almost see the old rooster flapping his wings and strutting as if he owned the Paramos. It had been a long, hard trip. They had plodded up the steep mountains for 4 days, often slipping and falling in the thick mud. Now they were almost there. For some time, Goyo had seen the towering peaks that guarded their own little part of the high Paramos. He had recognized their jagged outline against the deep blue sky. He had seen the giant condor circling lazily overhead, just as it always did in the late afternoon. Now came the cock-a-doodle-doo of old Inca. Yes, he was almost home. Goyo ran on ahead of the mule team, then stopped to shout impatiently, "Anda! Get on, you sheep! Do not stop now, we are almost there!" But sheep are not mules to be driven where one wills. Goyo's 6 long-haired animals had decided that this was a good time to eat. As if by a signal, they all left the trail and scattered along the hillside to graze. It had been this way during the whole journey. They had caused Goyo nothing but trouble on the steep, muddy trail. Sometimes they ran far ahead and scattered, so that he had to spend an hour running up and down the mountainside after them. Or else they stopped completely and lay down. More than once, Goyo had been tempted to leave them behind. Then he would think of grandfather's face when he saw them, and panting wearily would start them on their way once more. Well, they were almost up the hill now, and then the locos could run all over the Paramos, for all he cared. Goyo, who felt like Chico, shifted his heavy saddlebags to the other shoulder. Besides the sheep, he had bought straw enough for 4 hats, and not coarse straw either, but the finest there was. And Tia Maria had sewn the precious measuring straws into his old trousers, which he now wore. There would be no mistake about the size of the next hat. There were parcels of tobacco and rice and brown sugar besides, and a new pipe for Viejito. Goyo had even bought some fresh meat, but before the first day had passed, he had had to throw it away. As they came nearer and nearer the end of the trail, Goyo dropped back alongside of Don Ernesto and said excitedly, "Don Ernesto, let us fool old man at first. Let us not tell him right away that I've found out who I am." The man nodded and smiled. "Well, then, I had better not call you Goyo," he said. "All right, call me Chico, and then Viejito will not know." Goyo agreed. With that, Goyo was away. Running as fast as he could, he came to the top of the hill and disappeared over the crest. Don Ernesto plodded after him, driving the mules and the sheep up the path. Now Goyo could see the house. It was just the same. The grey stone walls melted into the grey earth, and the long thatch hung down just as shaggily as ever. A bit of white smoke plumed upward and melted into the clear, cold air. Goyo ran with all his might, his bundles pounding against his shoulders. Now he ran down the little hollow. Now he crossed the stream. Now... Goyo stopped as he saw a little grey-brown shape waddle through the doorway. The creature looked about, sniffing the air, then sat down on its haunches and scratched behind one ear. "Chan!" Goyo dropped the saddlebags and ran forward. The little bear looked at him questioningly. "Don't you know me, Chan?" The little bear took a few steps forward uncertainly. Then he recognized his master and with a joyful yelp rushed up to him and rolled frantically at his feet. Goyo dropped to his knees and rubbed one cheek on Chan's soft fur. The bear squirmed in delight. "What is it, Chan?" came a voice. Goyo looked up. There, in the door of the little house, stood grandfather, rubbing his eyes as though he had been awakened from his nap by the fire. "Viejito, it is I! I am back!" Goyo called as he ran to him. The old man stretched out a gnarled hand and touched the boy's hair as though he could not believe it was he. Then he threw both arms about him and held him close. "Chico, Chico, is it really you? Are you truly home?" He murmured over and over again. Goyo felt the tears start to his eyes. With his arm still around the boy, Viejito led him into the house. It was all just the same. Goyo sighed happily. There were the 2 beds, the chest, and the smoke-blackened corner where the fire flickered. Goyo ran with all his might, his bundles pounding against his shoulders. "Don Ernesto has come too," Goyo explained. There was a sharp bark from Chan, and the old man walked to the door. Suddenly, he began to wave his arms. "Caramba! What are those animals doing here?" he shouted excitedly. Goyo peered under his arm and saw the 6 sheep scattering over the paramos. "They are for you, old man," Goyo laughed. "You always said you wanted some sheep, and I have brought them for you." "For me? All of those?" The old man stared. 6 sheep. He was a rich man. Then Don Ernesto arrived, and there was much stamping of the mule's hooves and loud greetings between the 2 men. Chan ran around, wildly excited, and even old Inca crowed again. Inside the house, the 3 sat close by the fire to sip their hot coffee. Goyo told how he had sold his hat. Viejito laughed heartily. Then the boy took out his presents and the food. He even showed Viejito his new black suit and shoes. When Goyo told how everyone had said his hat was a fine one, the old man's eyes shone proudly. Then, all at once, Goyo was silent. The 3 sat quietly, staring into the flames. Each knew that the time had come for more important talk. Goyo waited for the old man's questions. He was so full of the story he could hardly hold it back. But instead of smiling happily, he tried to look sad. "Well, Chico, what else happened?" the old man asked gently. "What else? Why, there was a fiesta and—" No, I mean, have you forgotten why you went to Cuenca? Did you find nothing? Is that why you have returned?" Goyo could hold it back no longer, even to fool the old man. "Viejito," he burst out, "old man, I have a name." "Truly?" The old man looked startled. "See, I learned it from the padre. He knew my mother and my father, too. My name is Gregorio Aniceto Jimenez y Rodriguez." Old man gave a start. "Rodriguez, then, was your mother's name. Strange, strange. That was my daughter's mother's name, too. But then it is a common one." Goyo went on to tell of the farm and the house. The old man stared into the fire. "And there are no relatives left?" he asked at last. Don Ernesto answered, "There are some relatives of the boy's father in Loja, the padre told me, but they are not close ones from what he said. Goyo must go there someday to see them." "And on the mother's side?" "There is only one old man," Goyo said, "and we do not even know his name. But he lives somewhere in the mountains, they think. That is funny." He stopped and looked at the old man. "I never thought of it before, but he must live just as you do. The only thing we know about him is that he has a birthmark, red and shaped like a melon, on his back. He would be my grandfather," he added wistfully. Goyo hardly noticed when the old man stood up and threw off his poncho, as though he were hot. And, what was your mother's name, my boy?" the old man asked in a trembling voice. His clumsy hands fumbled with the buttons of his shirt. "Did I not say?" "Rodriguez. Josefina Rodriguez," he answered. Goyo looked up. The old man had taken off his shirt, and without a word, he turned to show his back. Goyo stared. There, on the old man's back, was a mark shaped like a melon, red as fire. Goyo could not believe his eyes. Then, You are— Don Ernesto stood up and walked away, wiping at his eyes. I am that old man. Josefina was my only child. She left me long ago to make Panama hats in Cuenca, and you, Goyo, are truly my own grandson. Even a boy as big as Goyo has a right to cry over such a discovery. He had found his grandfather, his mother's father, and he was the old man whom he loved so much. Goyo sat at grandfather's feet, his hand on the old man's knee. Don Ernesto returned to the circle, and the talk went on and on. Goyo told how he hoped to live on the farm, which was now partly grandfather's, and make hats and go to school for part of the year. Grandfather nodded contentedly. What Goyo wanted to do, he would do. It was late when they stopped talking. Goyo sat thoughtfully for a few moments, and then, without a word, got up and walked to the door. Outside, it was cold and dark. The Paramos mist had fallen and clothed the moors in its white covering. But no longer did Goyo fear it. He took a few steps farther from the house. The mist was all about him now. Goyo bent down and touched the cold, hard earth. Here was his land. When he had found grandfather, he had found his tierra. No longer would he wander, searching for his home. No matter how far he might go in his life, he would always return for strength to this land of the Paramos. When Goyo straightened up, he held a little of the soil clenched in his hand. He sighed. He was content at last. Goyo, whose name had been Chico, had found his good earth.